Joining us now to take a deep dive into the report is a member of the commission, Adam White, law professor at the Antonin Scalia School of Law and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, spent 7 months in extensive meetings, discussions, reviews, and research, contributing his expertise to this project. Adam, it's great to have you with us to talk about this report. You just heard News In Depth reporter Mark Irons talk to Judge Thomas Griffith, who says he hopes Americans will read this report. In Time magazine, he also urged the court to remain as it is. He was saying we ought to be really careful about tinkering with it because you know that what the consequences could be. He was adding that he believes court expansion could prove an existential threat to judicial independence. Does that reflect the spirit of the commission?
Well, the commission included people of a wide variety of views, as you've already seen. Our report does lay out the arguments for reform, although calling these things reform would be putting it lightly, and the arguments against these things. I think the reform arguments are stark and they deserve the public's attention precisely because of the changes and even damage they could do to the Supreme Court. And the arguments against those changes are laid out in the report as well, and I hope the public studies them. That's
real analysis that's there, and nearly 300 pages of reflections, but no action items. Adam, why is that?
President Biden didn't explicitly ask us for recommendations. He asked us to identify and appraise the issues, and we did that. I will say I was honored to be appointed to the committee or the commission, and over the course of many months, I think we did a good job of studying and debating even those with whom we disagree, including Judge Gertner, with whom I did enjoy serving on the commission. But in the end, there is a great division of opinion across the commission. And so I think the report did the best it could to just lay out the pros and cons.
So maybe it is reflective of the political gridlock that we're seeing in America. There was one place that did seem to have some traction. That's the issue of term limits. What did the commission conclude there?
Well, first, let me just say there's a lot of political gridlock in Washington and maybe in the country. I don't see any political groundswell nationwide or even in Washington to substantially change the courts. On the issue of term limits, we've seen people on both the right and left sort of think out loud about term limits. And frankly, I was open to the idea when I joined the commission. But as I've set forth in a statement at the end of the process, I do think adding term limits would itself be a great mistake. We need judges to be independent with life tenure, and any process for implementing term limits, even just going forward, would require major changes to the allocation of power between the president and the Senate over the appointment of new justices.
And it would affect their ongoing work, of course, which is something that you reviewed in this report, how the court conducts its work, specifically the use of the emergency appeals docket, which has come up under a little bit of scrutiny. What can you tell us about that, Adam?
Throughout the process, I kept finding myself asking, what does this mean for the court as a court, not as a political institution or a mini legislature, but a multi-member body that has to decide cases under laws that the judges themselves do not write? On the question of the emergency docket, the power of the Supreme Court to grant injunctions while cases are pending, that's not extraordinary for the Supreme Court. We see it all up and down the federal judiciary, from trial judges up to the Supreme Court. It's an important power and often a necessary power, but it's a lot of discretion in the hands of judges and justices. And so I said in my final statement that I do think it's worthwhile to think through that power, maybe have Congress prescribe clearer standards for the use of that power. But some have tried to make this an argument about the Supreme Court's powers. And on this issue, it's not. It's the power of judges throughout our country, which is important and crucial. But as with all matters of law, it needs to be prescribed and the discretion limited.
What were some of the proposals that were given to limit that discretion? I know that was part of the report as well.
Well, by and large, I haven't seen too many direct proposals to get rid of that power. There's calls for more transparency. There's calls for the court to use that power in different ways, in different sort of directions, depending on the policy issue. I think everybody recognizes that courts need these powers. You'll see progressives and conservatives alike championing the exercise of that power from time to time. I think right now the court's critics mostly just don't like the way the court happens to be using that power now. But that can't be the debate we're having. It can't be about who's winning and losing a given case at a given moment. These are questions about the structure of our Supreme Court in general, our judiciary in general, and our constitutional government in general. We need to treat it that way and not as a horse race in individual cases.
Very important reflection there, Adam. What about the value of COVID reforms, where the public now has real-time access to the court's oral arguments and proceedings? Was anyone against this move toward transparency, or was it widely accepted and enthusiastic?
I think it was widely accepted. It used to be you wouldn't get the audio of the oral arguments until usually days after the fact or more. You now get same-day audio, streaming audio. Transcripts have been much more readily available for a few years now. These are all good developments, and they probably strike a good balance between sort of public transparency, but also leaving space for the court to do business out of view of cameras. I do think cameras in the courtroom are particularly different, and there's a reason why cameras in the courtroom have been a much more controversial proposal for which there really is not a groundswell or a critical mass of support yet, and definitely not on the court.
Well, I know that more Americans have been engaged in listening in, which is really beautiful to watch us really participating in democracy in this way. Was there any other point in the commission's debates where you thought this is really a dangerous proposal that you felt compelled to stop?
Well, for me, the big two were court packing, of course, and the term limits issue. On the other issues, my concern was a bit broader. I don't think this is a time for politicians, the Congress or the president, to sort of gang up on the Supreme Court and try to change it. I think this is a time for all three branches of government, the court, Congress, and the president. So I'll take a hard look at how their own institutions are operating, look for ways to reform themselves and restrain themselves, not for two branches of government to forcibly change the other. I think that's always a treacherous or a risky provision, and it certainly would be right now, and certainly with respect to the Supreme Court.
Well, Adam, we'll be watching for your statements and whatever else is coming from this commission, and we're grateful for your service.
Well, thank you.